Hello. Well, we're not quite in a familiar place. We're in a slightly different place. We've been at a conference at Crystal Lodge in Harare, and we've come to the end of the day, and also coinciding with the end of the year. Well, end of November, we're going into silly season. I don't know when you guys
We've
will
been in
watch
silly
this.
season for a minute.
No, you've been in silly season.
For him, every day is a silly season for him, so it doesn't really make a difference.
And in Tinashe's absence, Rufaro and Ranga and I have been, sort of reminiscing about the year and the highs and lows of 2022. And we thought it might be good to perhaps put some of our thoughts on camera. It'll be interesting to get your feedback in the comment section and on our social media handles on your take on some of these issues. Good to have you back on this side of the camera.
Yeah, it's good. It's been a minute, eh? So
Yeah, well, he's paying for our drinks, so it's
You know what, Ranga? I think this is the first time you and I have been on camera together.
Yeah.
You usually stepping in for
Yes,
me.
yes. I usually step in for you, so yeah, it's good to be here. Oh, Tinashe is not here, so I think we might have a different show altogether.
And, yeah,
we don't really miss the
Yeah.
No, we don't. No.
Yeah.
Although you're looking dapper.
Thanks.
Have you been inspired?
Thanks. Look, I mean, we've done episodes so far, and watching. I mean, that transformation. Obviously, look at Rufaro. You can see the influence of Tinashe on him and pretty much everyone. I think the only
You think
person,
I've been
the only person that Tinashe has felt inspired, I think is George. What do you think, Rufaro?
Yeah.
Or maybe just being an outright rebel, or just okay, guys, this is my style. I'll keep it.
Well, it did.
Yeah. But it's good to be here.
Irreverent, indifferent, uninspiring.
Clothes serve a functional purpose.
But he's into clothing business. He's a fashion guy. He's supposed to be the fashion guy.
No, I wear good quality clothes.
He runs a whole fashion industry.
My wife does.
Okay.
Anyway, it's good to have you on this side of the camera, Ranga. As we look back through the year, what are some of the important themes in economic policy this year?
So look, there were quite a number of issues. Like when the year started, we were coming from a 2021 year where we had seen a runaway inflation. The rate, the $10.
No, it hadn't started, right?
Yes,
it's now galloping.
Yes, but I think 2021 there were indications that things were actually getting out of hand. Even the rate itself, to a point that maybe when we got into January, the kind of projection that people had for where they expected the rate to be by end of December, I think the numbers were scary. And but yet we're also coming from a good year from agricultural point of view, where a good crop was actually achieved, a bumper harvest.
Although we didn't get anywhere
we
near
didn't
the
get
10 million.
That bumper harvest didn't come into GMB.
No. Okay, it didn't come into GMB, but we don't have hunger and starvation. So sometimes
we're importing food.
We are importing food, but look, I think
hunger and starvation is at a very low bar.
But the way I look at it is, you see,
this guy is socialist.
Yeah. So sometimes you might have actually industrial players importing for one reason or another. But
it's not one reason or another. They're importing because there is no maize.
But do you feel like people are starving out there?
No, they're not starving because we're importing.
Because they're importing. But I still think that people in the rural areas actually have got stocks of maize that they are depending on right now. And I don't think the NGO community has been as busy as it has always been in terms of being able to provide grain and feed the people. So I think to that extent, it's fine. Look, it wasn't the number that we expected, but it wasn't that bad.
It was less bad.
It was less bad. So it was that from the agricultural point of view, and obviously we knew that going into 2022, things were going to be a bit more different. And then so inflation, then the exchange rate, then developments on the agri front. But I will also speak to how we've benefited from the commodity price boom.
Sorry, I want to stop you. As you can tell, Rufaro and I have had one or two already.
Exactly.
Let's go back to this.
And you're paying for more.
Let's go back to this agriculture story of yours. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You say it was less bad.
Mm-hmm.
GMB was nowhere near its targets. Command Agriculture, okay, we should probably stop calling it Command Agriculture. That program doesn't really exist anymore. Recovered, I believe, 20 or 25%. I think 22% is the number of the debts.
Zim dollar debts.
Yes. So in US dollars, they recovered even less. And then, as we film this, we're talking about the wheat Command Agriculture again, which has come in at about a third
of what was expected.
Was it expected, or it was an aspiration or a wish?
Well, a third of what we were told was coming.
Yeah, okay.
So, where's the not bad aspect or the less bad aspect? I mean,
yeah, I don't think.
Okay, you in your business go through your debtors book, and 1/3 of your debtors have paid. Oh no, sorry, 22% of your debtors have paid.
Yeah,
is this by any stretch of the imagination less bad?
So you'd say generally no, but I think you have to put context to this. So number one, you can't use the deliveries to GMB as a measure of how good our agriculture season has been, because GMB is actually is notorious for not paying on time, and I want to believe that there are quite a number of farmers who did not deliver their crop to GMB, choosing to hold on to their crop.
So you believe?
I believe that there are farmers.
Somebody who's got tons of wheat on their farm in the rainy season.
I believe that. Yes, even in terms of the wheat, they may not. It's not like every small player, but I think for the big players that have got storage facilities, it makes sense. Why would you want to deliver to a GMB that would pay you $90 and some portion in Zim dollars, say for the maize?
Do you sometimes drive on the highway?
I do a lot.
And you see farms.
I see farms
that grow wheat. And on how many of these farms have you seen huge silos?
I haven't seen huge silos, but I think in terms of the size of the crop that we were expecting about what, 380.
And we got 130.
Yes.
So where do you think this other 290, this other 260 or 250 or 260 is being stored if we don't see huge silos? I mean,
yeah.
What you think there's a magical?
No. It doesn't have to be magical.
Wonderland where you go through this thing and then you end up in the land of Oz. Where they're storing it in the land of Oz.
No. But do you actually think
it's a rabbit hole? Like you go through a rabbit hole and you come out in the land of Oz.
Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, no. But I still think that some of the big farmers who are there have got capacity to store grain, maybe for up to a certain period. It could be no, on their farms.
Wait, I've asked you. Have you seen these big silos?
I haven't seen big silos, but it doesn't take silos for the kind of storage that they. I don't believe that what has been delivered so far is the only crop which is there. I can't speak to wheat, but I can speak to maize, because even the little interaction that I've had with some people in my network, I know some people that did not deliver anything to the GMB, and this grain could be in some places that maybe right now.
Okay.
I'm not at liberty to talk about. So the GMB,
the jury's out on the agriculture. You think it was less bad?
Yeah, it was less bad.
Let's talk inflation.
Yes. I think the inflation aspect,
which as we speak is 200 and what? 258.
Yeah.
%.
And I think that it's actually quite some improvement, given what was expected.
Where does this guy live?
No, what was the expectation of on inflation by end of December?
So it's less bad again.
It's less bad, yeah. We were
very low bars.
We were expecting about 1,000. The Zim dollar to be close to 1,000 by August, and you know what that was going to do to your inflation. The inflation numbers were actually expected to be even close to 1,000% by this time of the year, if we had actually continued with the trajectory that we had. Late 2021 into the first 3 months of 2022. So obviously, because of the interventions that the government actually put in place, whether you think they were good or bad, but I think the effect of slowing down the inflation.
So,
But obviously,
I
without
want to interrogate that further because I think it's an interesting question to say. So the government certainly took some action that has succeeded in taking liquidity out of the system and reining in the rate. But in terms of the overall health of the economy, is it sustainable? Is it, I think in tax accounting they have what they call timing differences, right? You can arrange your affairs in such a way that your tax bill for a particular period actually goes down significantly, but you still have the liability, and somewhere along the line, you're gonna pay. It's a timing difference, and so my sense, and I could be wrong, is that the action that was taken to rein in liquidity and the rate, it's just a timing difference. They've just kicked the can further down the road. There are bills that they still will have to pay, and that inflation that could have been much worse is just going to manifest at a future date.
The counter argument, Rufaro, is now they've got more control. They're going to drip feed it, and they're not accumulating new bills.
And also, there's also the signaling effect. Now it's clear to someone's mind that the inflation that we're expecting to be 1,000% or whatever number, which is much bigger, there is actually government is taking a position to say, no, this figure has to be contained. So it also informs even economic agents, economic players to say, if you were banking or if you are riding on something that's going to be driven by inflation, now you know that maybe you were not going to get that. Look at the issue of some of the invoices that government has been paying. I'm sure there was a big talk on social media on the laptop issue that had been billed at 9,000. So I think the action that government took actually also helped to signal even to its rather economic agents that in future it may not be easy for you to just bill government, give them some fund bill, and you expect them to.
Do you believe leopards can change their spots?
I believe that given the risk that maybe we were facing, had this inflation sort of trend, it had been allowed to continue, the risk that was going to ensure was going to be much higher. That even for someone who is not given to changing the tact could have been forced to take that stage, especially as we approach the election year. There's no way it was going to be a very difficult time if they just left it to be away that trend, and maybe to a point where maybe right now inflation was going to be 1,000% in the rate, some number. So look, I think they were forced by circumstances, and when you look at where we are right now compared to where we could have been, I think they look at it, it's less bad. And whatever costs and pain that maybe we are seeing right now, I think they are more favorable compared to what it could have been. So
it's sounding a lot like the theme for this year is less bad.
Ranga's been drinking the Kool-Aid. We'll take a quick break and we'll see you in a couple of minutes. And we're back. And refreshed.
Cheers, Ranga.
Cheers. Thank you, Ranga.
Okay.
I hope you're enjoying your water.
Have fun, guys.
Yeah,
look, I do actually. It's good. It keeps me sober, and so that I can be able to manage.
And gives you this this colored view of the world.
No, the more clarity, it gives me clarity. I think if you were to talk about the colored view, this is where the colored view can come from.
Oh, right.
This is clear. So my view is as clear as what you're seeing in this bottle.
If you say so. So What else has happened during the year?
So the stock market, obviously, it's a good point to look at. The market in 2021 for the rest of that year was quite buoyant. There's a lot of activity, and because money was actually flowing into the market, local money, that is, because you want to put some context. Foreigners were still selling in 2021.
The little that they had
The
left.
little that they had left. And the good thing is, as they were selling, the locals were buying. And I think what was clear at that point was the buying was mostly for by hedgers. So it wasn't your typical institutions that were buying for the long term. But these were hedgers, maybe
The people who sold laptops for 9,000.
exactly, and other people that also had access to huge amounts of Zim dollars. So they're pretty much packing the Zim dollars there. So at some point, that was bound to change with any change in terms of the liquidity situation, especially the main source, which was government. And then I think when government saw what was happening with inflation and the exchange rate, and also there was this whole talk about the stock market being one of the areas that were singled out for pushing the rate high, and as a result, the inflation that we saw funds liquidity actually dropping down quite aggressively on the stock market. And the moment that happened, obviously, we started seeing selling. And I think there was that aspect, but then there was also the aspect of what happened on the banking side when one lending was stopped and for a while, and then when lending resumed, interest rate had actually been hiked to as high as 200%. So what it meant is we just before that there was a lot of leveraged um, uh, positions that were actually emerging on the market. Maybe people were buying to buy assets. It could be on the
We're
stock
borrowing
market.
money to.
Yeah, they were borrowing money to buy shares, to buy currency, that kind of thing. So with the interest rates rising, it became very expensive. And then we started seeing that reverse where people were actually liquidating their position to at least extinguish their now expensive Zim dollar debt and etc. And that also the flow of money that was coming from these resources was not coming because government had also stopped what paying. So all that had actually had the effect on the stock market where activity slowed down. There was massive selling, and we actually started seeing value being lost in real terms and also actually in Zim dollar
Was
terms.
value being lost or was value correcting? Was the market not overvalued?
I think the issue of value is a difficult one in Zim. I think I would say as long as you've got inflation and you've got a currency that is unstable, like the experience in Zim has been, the issue of valuation usually falls away because people tend to then invest out of fear to hedge their positions and etc. I think the only time that we really had value investing or where people really looking value is when we had stability in the Zim dollar, in the US dollar era. So people who were buying shares were not really asking you what the price to earnings ratio for this thing was, whether this thing was generating
So
cash.
wasn't the market overvalued?
The market was overvalued, yes, but I think the real
But value
issue
was not relevant.
it wasn't.
No, I'm not. This is not a blame game. It's
Exactly.
a statement of fact. Was the market
Exactly.
overvalued?
It
and,
was.
And wasn't the subsequent act? Didn't the subsequent acts of government lead to a correction of the value?
So
It's an
see,
overcorrection because if you look at the valuation today, even if you adjust it for stocks that have since moved to the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, you create an atmosphere where before, when the market was overvalued, the ZSE was a perfect hedge for inflation, and it was 100% legal. So it was much more popular in certain institutions that couldn't participate in the power market rate. And what the policy action has done is it's made it clear that speculation was going to be punished, and if the market runs, there will be arbitrary policy action to rein it in. So not only do you have all this money that used to go and park on the ZSE to ring fence against inflation, not doing it, you've got people who were in there previously saying, look, let's get out before the next.
But is this a bad thing?
But
how is it a bad thing?
So basically, so all that selling pressure has basically has moved the needle from one spectrum to the other. So it was overvalued because people didn't care about valuation, because they just wanted to ring fence against inflation. And now it's undervalued because nobody wants to touch it.
Everyone just wants to get out.
Yeah.
Okay, so but at the same time, there's a huge trick to the Vic Falls Stock Exchange.
Yeah, I think
is it a huge trick?
So
or journalists just
there's quite a number of things that is happening, George. So so the situation where I know some companies have actually approached the exchange and say, you know what, we want to delist because this is not making sense anymore. We are not able to raise money, and what's happening on the stock market is not really giving us any advantage, whether in terms of us being able to remunerate our top executives with share options, and this a number of issues, and obviously because the exchange is trying to keep listings, they're like, oh, okay, if you've got problems with here the ZSE, maybe you can try the V4's exchange. So there's that aspect, but there's also I think there's a general, with what has happened in terms of the policy directives and measures, they were actually targeting the ZSE because it's trading in Zim dollars. So all that has happened, even if you look from Old Mutual and PPC fungibility suspension and what happened to the entire market and all the taxes and whatever, I think the message that is coming from policymakers is the stock exchange, as long as it's trading in Zim dollars, it's seen as creating problems on the monetary space. So I think there's a shift for the ones that still want to maintain their listing. They are actually moving towards more to the VFX because it's a US dollar denominated.
And how are they protected against the same arbitrary actions? Policy actions.
Yes, it's very difficult, but I think what the thinking is, the bigger part of the attacks or the policy action has been on the Zim dollar, how the stock market activities have affected Zim dollar on trading. The paro market. So when you go out there, you don't have any Zim dollar to deal with, and look, the activity there remains very
muted.
Yes, but I don't think that it will remain the case, as the US dollar usage in the economy is actually increasing. So pension funds, maybe institutions or individuals or investors, the receipts in currency, in US dollar terms, are actually increasing. So you'd expect at some point maybe that those funds will also start trickling onto the VFX. But I think we have not done anything to lure back your foreign investors. Okay. Yeah. So it will remain a local exchange that's trading in.
It's a special economic zone.
Exactly.
You're giving it too much credit.
So you touched in your comments there on the suspension of you referred to it as a suspension of the fungibility on Old Mutual and PPC, but it was an outright suspension of Old Mutual, wasn't it?
Yes.
And so that suspension remains.
So it started off with fungibility, then the actual suspension, and now we hear that maybe there's some efforts to try and bring those two counters back in one form or another. And obviously, I think there are some conversations that are taking place, because
but isn't this? I mean, shouldn't you have led with this? I mean, isn't this catastrophic that there can be an arbitrary suspension of a listed security because people invest in listed securities on the basis of a law and a promise from the government, the exchange, and everyone else that if you ever want to sell this asset, you call a broker and you ask for a price and you can sell it. You'll have your money in 2 days or whatever it is now. It's T plus 2 at the moment.
Yeah, so that's the irony. That's the gap between the very venerable slogan, which is Zimbabwe is open for business, right? It's a fantastic thing to be telling the world, and the reality on the ground, right? So what has happened to FDI? Why isn't the country inundated with foreigners looking to invest in projects, even uh, that don't involve the stock exchange with all its challenges, right? It's because of such precedents where you make commitments and promises and you break them. So somebody sitting on millions of dollars in Joburg or London or New York that would typically invest in a jurisdiction like Zimbabwe is looking at these things and saying, you know what, guys, I'm going to give that part of the world a miss.
I
Yeah,
mean,
but there's still some investment that are actually coming through.
I think the
Um,
kinds that we want.
the Chinese, they are building a still business in
Distance
Vumi.
game.
Vuma.
Yeah.
Vuma. Is Vuma, right?
Vuma, yeah.
The
Vuma,
disco,
sorry, yeah.
yes. The Invictus, they are still prospecting for
But
iron.
how much better would it be?
Mhm.
If it was ExxonMobil and not Invictus.
And if
No, no,
how
no.
much more money would we be raising? I mean,
Mhm.
Invictus has in the past few weeks had a little bit of a wobble, right,
Mhm.
in their capital raising, and they've had to raise the money in Australia.
Mhm.
What if they could raise the money on the ZSE? And how many more projects would be going on if people could trust the environment? I mean, you're a student of the law. Doesn't it actually violate natural justice principles that you can make me a promise and I take a position based on the promise you've made me, and then you arbitrarily change it, and then that affects my financial position?
Yeah, look, I think the whole issue of property rights it actually hinges on that, isn't it? That if you make a promise that this is how you're going to operate, I think someone comes into an environment knowing exactly what to expect, and because you see some of these policies, I think our biggest issue has been consistency in terms of the things that we do and say. So, but obviously, whenever there's some pressure coming from one point or another, we have failed to maintain that consistency. But I also think that to a certain extent, there's actually I don't think our some of our policy makers actually understand the positive impact that the capital markets could actually have on the economy. So, as a source of raising that capital that you are talking about, in fact, I think when you look at investment, it's easier to attract portfolio investment before you get your foreign direct investments. So usually, because your portfolio investment is always moving, it's hot money, right?
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be the first
To get in
movers,
and the first to get out.
first to move, to get in and to get out. And if you are getting a good vibe from your portfolio investors, it then starts. It has got a tendency of then attracting the long term.
Sorry, just to
investor.
explain to some of the viewers, a portfolio investor is somebody who usually invests on the stock exchange. They invest short term. They're just looking for short term gains.
Not necessarily short-term gains, but okay. So let me explain this because
Okay,
you
thank you.
clearly don't know what
Okay.
portfolio investment is. So portfolio investors, they typically invest in public markets because public markets are created. So for you to be listed anywhere in the world, you go through a process where you have to demonstrate governance, audited financial statements, and the exchange itself meets certain standards. So from a due diligence perspective, versus going to your farm and trying to understand what George is going to do with the money he's asking from you, it's the bar is much lower. So it's much easier for a foreign investor to take a view because they can just download financial statements and have reasonable comfort that the numbers in there,
audited, etc.
or what they say there. Because I mean, if I come to your farm and you tell me that you're gonna do phenomenal things, I'm gonna take that with a bucket of salt, right? But if I am looking at something that's listed and I look at their financials, I have much more comfort. So it's much easier to make those kinds of investments. And typically, when a jurisdiction opens up, it's the first kind of money that comes in. But also, when things aren't working out, it's the first kind of money that exits. And so, what's happening on the portfolio investment front tells us it's a really good barometer of what foreign investors are thinking. But it's not just foreign investors who are saying, look, we don't like what's happening here. We're not. Who do you think the biggest bank is in Zimbabwe at the moment?
The biggest commercial bank?
Bank of any description.
CBZ?
I think there's a bigger bank in our country, the National Mattress Bank.
Oh, okay.
There's more value in terms of the deposits in that bank than any of the actual licensed and regulated
financial institutions.
Because even locals, when they think about saving money, they're much more comfortable with green notes than a bank balance, whether it's a Nostro bank balance or it's a Zim-dollar bank balance. The average Zimbabwean or corporate entrepreneur, apart from the highly regulated businesses that have no option but to bank in the formal banking system, everybody else who can save in green notes would rather hold on to green notes. And so that money is not being lent, it's not being invested.
Speaking of which, then, re-dollarization, de-dollarization, over the course of the year, which way have we gone?
I think the problem is...
The government says we're following a de-dollarization agenda. Is that what is happening on the ground?
Yeah, so I was going to ask, do you trust what they say? Because...
I'm not getting into trouble.
Remember when we were just coming out of the multiple currency system, in fact, before, the central bank would go on and on saying that they were not going to issue any local currency until certain parameters.
Patrick Chinamasa said the Zim dollar is dead.
You see,
famously.
Yeah, even Governor Mangunja is saying, no, we need to make sure that we have got a certain size of import cover and some very, very encouraging, sensible kind of things. But what happened? They just decided at some point that no, it's a good idea to have Zim dollars back. And then after that, remember there was some SI that was outlawing US dollars. Then maybe a month or two later, no, you can start using them. So it's actually the inconsistency that is a problem. And I think if there's another issue that I would just want to touch on is what they actually done with lending and and when they hiked the interest rate. For me, the signal that they sent out there to everyone was, look, be careful. Don't make sure that you move your business away from the Zim dollars, because all policy intervention that they can bring in, they are only possible with Zim dollar related kind of business. So if you are doing US dollar business, you are sort of cushioned. So it means it doesn't make sense anymore to borrow in Zim dollars. It doesn't make
to sell.
Yeah, to sell.
So he's given to being polite.
Yeah.
Zim dollar is dying. That's the reality on the ground. If you look at even big formal corporates like Delta, their revenue is skewing more and more to US dollars, and the Zim dollar portion of it is shrinking. And I don't see that trend reversing, because for a currency to be viable, it must enjoy the faith and confidence of the people that use it every day. And, that's just a fantasy for the Zim dollar. Nobody, I mean, if you got a windfall today for 10 million Zim dollars, would you be happy? If I checked on you 3 months from now,
would my Zim dollar bank account still be full?
Would you still have, you know what I mean? What?
My Zim dollar bank balance would be low. My mattress bank would be full. My Zim dollar borrowings would be maxed out.
Yeah, so I just want to go back a little bit on the issue of the stock market and how it has to be promoted as opposed to being denigrated and having all these negative policies coming in to just make sure there's no activity. So we have just discussed how portfolio investment is actually critical.
Thank you for bringing us back on.
Yes, it's actually critical. So instead of going to those conferences and whatever, Farouk, there was a time 2009 to 2010 where stockbrokers, asset managers, we were going out into to the UK, to the US, to South Africa, we were actually going to sell the brand Zimbabwe. Like, bring your money on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. Why? Because we are seeing growth in the macros and the companies are growing. This is the kind of trajectory. So it doesn't need government to hire an international PR for
Zimbabwean businesses will do it for them.
Zimbabwean business will do it for them. And the story is believable because you go talk to it's more like business to business kind of interactions where you can have like honest kind of discussions and say, look, this is what we are seeing, and these guys are asking the right questions. And for a time, the market was able to convince all these foreigners to bring money into Zim.
So the biggest, most prominent stockbrokers would actually have annual conferences
exactly
in Harare, where they would parade listed company CEOs and CFOs. They'd have presentations. They'd have a prominent economist talk about why Zimbabwe is a great place to bring your money, why the outlook is positive. And people would fly in at their own expense and spend a bunch of days at a conference organized by a stockbroker to learn about the listed companies, to hear. And typically you would also get senior government officials invited to the conference to interact with these foreign investors, to reassure them that everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet of driving growth.
But then at some stage, these guys felt like they'd been recruited to lie on behalf of the country.
You see,
the market, the beauty of the market is there's a certain honesty about it, where so you have these conferences happening every year, 2009, 2010, 2010, and then somewhere along the line they stopped, right? The person who actually had to put the money together, send out the invites and make it all happen, just realized that it was a fraud.
Yes, that's what I mean. He said to himself, I'm lying on behalf of the country.
It became,
he wasn't willing to do it anymore.
It became very, very difficult. I remember we were sitting in one meeting on one of the road shows. I don't know if you still remember, with some fund managers. And they made an accusation. And like, they were asking, okay, so what do you think about this? And then we're giving them what we thought was the outlook. And like, guys, just be honest with us. Just be honest with us. Because the problem that you guys from Zim have is you tend to be therapeutic about the situation in your country. So we were actually doing a good job of selling Zim. And some of the portfolio investors that came here just buying shares on the stock market, they actually ended up investing directly into Zim. Remember in other ways, I remember what happened with OK Investec and then things like that, taking up a major stake into the business. So this is how you get foreign direct investment into the country. Now, your one of your best advertising kind of agents that you could use are international brands. So these guys, whenever they would come, they would actually tell you that Ranga Faro, please organize a meeting with Old Mutual. Organize a meeting with a Delta or Econet or Stanchart or Stanbic or whatever. So it's, I think for the guy who's coming here, his report becomes more credible if he says, I met an Old Mutual. And this is what they think. But right I met an Stanchart, this is what they think.
But right now, if he goes to Old Mutual, they say...
And then boom, there's some story which says Old Mutual has been suspended. For what reason? No one says, no, you're pushing the exchange rate and whatever. So we're actually shooting ourselves in the foot. We have to do these little things. Instead of for the whole government bureaucracy spending time getting PRs or whatever, just leave market players who are to benefit from this kind of businesses to do that, like what brokers were doing, go sell. But when they sell the Zim story, at least just maintain.
Don't make them liars.
Exactly.
We need to go for a break, Ranga. you know, it's funny when he's on this side of the camera, he's just going on and on. When he's on the other side of the camera, he's hopping up and down like a madman, telling us to go for a break. It's we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
Back, and because you chowed all the time, we are not going to ask any more questions. maybe we'll talk a little bit about.
You see what happens when you. I'm spending most of the time behind the camera, so the
You've got so much to say.
Exactly. You see? So yeah, you can shoot.
Maybe we'll go into a little bit about the future, but I hope. I think, as I said earlier, this is probably being flighted over the Christmas break, but we're filming it at the beginning of December, and I think over the next couple of weeks we'll do a couple more of these that you guys can watch during the holidays, looking back on the year. Some of them, Tinashe will be back, and
unfortunately.
But yeah, just before we go away, looking forward, 2023 going to be a good year or a bad year?
Bad year.
Why?
Because of elections.
But in election years we spend, and the consumption will be high.
Yeah. So I think if there's one area that the policymakers have identified as a problem area for them, maybe not one, probably two, but they are interlinked, it's inflation and the exchange rate. So they will try as much as possible to curtail spending. So look, maybe the total bill spent will not change that much, but they'll actually move spending away from certain lines into some other lines. So I think like right now what you're seeing, there's actually they're tightening the pace, both in terms of the actual spending, but also the payments. So as we approach the elections, I think the expenditure is going to move away from those the things that you'd expect into supporting the actual election itself. And general economic activity in Zimbabwe actually sort of grinds to a halt whenever we approach an election period. And
no, but if you look at the consumer businesses, they do well in the election years.
And what happened to the Ranga who was
super
optimistic and who thinks leopards can change this? But maybe one of the things that they might do early in the year is something that they should have done years ago. You know, we were having the discussion earlier about how with fuel for years, for decades even, actually, we had shortages and queues and all sorts of headaches until somebody had an epiphany that all the fuel is imported with hard currency. The consumer should actually pay hard currency at the proper price. And then the queues, the shortages, challenges disappeared. Why are we not doing the same thing with electricity? We're having 24-hour plus power cuts. Why not just say, you know what? Most electricity is imported. It's hard currency.
I love you. I love your optimism that they can change their spots and that
I'm riding on Ranga's optimism.
And then we'll see US dollar electricity. If it happens, that'll be great. But speaking of electricity, and maybe when we do another review, because you're so optimistic and you think they're doing a fantastic job of running the economy, a less bad job of running the economy. Maybe you can tell me how we suddenly woke up one day and there was no water in Kariba. But maybe that's almost
no water in Kariba and the thermal power stations.
I actually don't think it was that sudden.
Well, we didn't do anything about it.
Yes.
So it could only have been sudden. I mean, because we're not crazy, right? Those guys are not crazy. They didn't see the lake drying, and do nothing. Or did they?
So of course they saw that, and I think for a time, I think in the last 2 years we saw a number of independent power producers being licensed, and I thought it was progressive in the sense that they'd realized that you can get private players to come.
No.
And
how is it progressive?
No, I mean besides all that.
Okay.
You've been drinking too much of their Kool-Aid. Ranga, in the month of November, September, October, November, months leading up to November, somebody was sending readings every day to somebody important at ZESA, who was in turn sending readings to somebody important at the Ministry of Energy, that this thing is running out of water.
Yeah.
And ZESA is full of engineers.
We didn't just
so they could predict to the day, if not to the hour, the moment that we'd run out of water.
Yeah, certainly I want to believe there's a system. That's why the Zimbabwe River Authority is there.
So how did we end up in the situation we are in now, early December, where we are having 24, 36-hour blackouts because there's no power.
Because maybe, or this is me trying to speculate. It could have been desperation because remember, we probably were failing to pay our creditors, electricity creditors on time, and then they were not supplying us. They've got their own supply.
But we gave MPs $40,000 loans.
Well, that's a gratuity. It's a payout for them. I heard.
And we sit in the dark.
Yes. Look, it's a very difficult one.
But the MPs with
I think
the MPs with their $40,000 loans
but
won't be able to go to a bottle store because the beer will be warm.
But don't you think it's an opportunity for us as a country to take a step back and say, okay, we need to have a proper energy policy and say, what do we need to have in place for us to have a long term?
Why do we need a policy?
Why not just liberalize?
No.
Like we've done with fuel?
Even that being able to liberalize could be part of a policy which says no, electricity can be. Maybe you need a utility that just controls the.
Let's look at what works in this country. What works really well. Tobacco production works really well.
Okay.
Over the past few years, the retail industry has worked really well.
Okay.
Alcohol industry works really well in this country.
Cheers to that.
And the list, we can add more to the list. Do we have policies in any of these? Is there any?
Some of them is because they are predominantly private sector, right? For example, retail.
That's his point. That's exactly his point. We have a highly regulated energy sector.
No. Let's talk about the ones that don't work. Okay. Fantastic case of one that doesn't work. Oh, this is part of our 2022 review. Transport, commuter transport hasn't been an issue in this country for a decade or so. Then all of a sudden in 2022, people can't get to work and people can't get home. Because what happened?
We said Zupco is the only one that's allowed to.
We actually made the policy. As much as we all complained about combis and how they drove and whatever, people were getting home and work at an affordable price.
No, the combis were a menace on the roads. And look, I think the idea of having sort of an integrated, say, transport system was good. But it's something that we just did without proper planning and resources into it. Imagine a scenario where we'd say, no, we like it's a public transport system that's not run like a Zupco. I mean, like the way they do in other countries.
What have we ever done from a government policy point of view that has worked?
It's a difficult question, but
let's pick another one. We get involved in the production of maize. We get involved in the production of wheat. End story. Problems. But they're staples. Very, very important. People will be upset if we don't have those. We don't get involved in the production of tomatoes. Which are
there ever shortages of tomatoes?
Which are staples, and every household uses them every day, and they'll be very upset if there are no tomatoes. And the price of tomatoes goes up, it goes down, it does all sorts of things. But have you ever had your wife say to you, "Oh no, I'm really stressed, we can't find tomatoes"?
Oh, look, but grains are different because
Why?
this is you want to make sure that it becomes a security issue. You know why?
And are we doing a good job?
Because if people are starving, then it becomes the whole thing becomes ungovernable.
And has the government policy intervention prevented people from starving?
I think that's not the best way of doing it, to be honest. But I think over the years we have really, obviously, when you look at agriculture, a lot of things actually went wrong after the land reform, with a few things that we've.
Let's do something.
Let's do something different. Let's do something different. He needs to spend more time behind the camera.
Let's do something different. No. It's first week of December. We're about to go to the round of 16 in the World Cup. The viewers are going to watch this probably close to the final, after the final, for fun, and see how this ages. Your prediction? Winner.
It's not a prediction. It's my wish. Brazil, that's the home of football. Okay, the UK, England would say this thing
they've had a bit of a rough.
So you're calling Brazil?
Yeah, I'll call Brazil as well.
I'm calling France. Let's see.
maybe the viewers will ask, there are still some African countries which are still in contention.
No,
How come?
France is an African team.
Maybe you can say the same about Brazil as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yes, you could.
Yeah.
Yes, you could. Yes, you could.
We love our African brothers, and personally, whenever they are playing, even against Brazil, the team that I support, the Africanness in me would always side with them. But I've learned over the years that you can't support them, otherwise you have a heart attack. They'll disappoint me.
Well,
Disappoint you.
Well, it'll be interesting to see you. At least you laugh at least some of us, or if not all of us, by the time you watch this. It'll be interesting to see your comments on our social media platforms. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe. Be good. If you can't be good at it.
Yeah.